are going to be covering a variety of topics, very much aimed at the first-time safari goer. Just a little bit about ourselves. We established African Budget Safaris way back in 2006. So we have been in the industry a long time. In those many years of dealing with safaris into Africa, we have experienced and covered everything. The idea behind this discussion is to give your first-time safari goer out there a bit of information on what they can expect, how best to prepare for a safari, all the various options out there in terms of safaris, which countries are best for certain sightings. It's very much a series that is aimed at people that have never been on safari before. My name is Terry Murphy. I grew up in Botswana, in Namibia, and in South Africa. I've been going on safari and been in the bush for basically my entire life, up until the time I moved down to Cape Town. I've worked within the industry for an extensive amount of time in Cape Town before setting up African Budget Safaris. Sitting with me today are my colleagues Harriet and Dan. I'm going to hand over to Harriet. She'll give you a little brief on exactly how she got into the industry and how long she's been.
My name's Harriet. I grew up in England, but I've been visiting Africa, West Africa, South Africa and East Africa for nearly 40 years now. And 20 years ago, I moved to live in Cape Town. So the African bug well and truly bit.
My name's Dan. I got into the travel industry in 95, 96. Originally into the backpacker scene, which is also the birth of the overland tours, which is we still focus on today. And then through the years, I've worked at various different travel agencies, ended up at African Budget Safaris in, I think it was 2012, and haven't looked back, and still really enjoying the whole Africa travel tourism industry and that. So it's great to be here with you today.
So this first episode is very much going to cover the basics. So first point of discussion is, what is a safari? Safari is actually a Swahili word, and it was derived from an Arabic subtext, and the word means to travel. I think the best way forward here is to discuss, for your first time guys that have never been on safari, what we normally recommend in terms of destinations. So broadly speaking, you can divide safari destinations into East and Southern Africa, East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Southern Africa, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and Zambia. Zambia very much for walking safaris, and I'll hand over to Harriet to give you a little idea of why East Africa we recommend Kenya for a first-time safari goer, and why we also recommend Tanzania for your first-time safari goer.
So in East Africa, particularly Kenya, it's a smaller country with the game parks. So the Masai Mara is smaller than the Serengeti. So it's easier to visit a larger number of parks in a shorter amount of time. So if your time's restricted, then Kenya can be better to visit than Tanzania. In Tanzania, if you're travelling between the Serengeti and the crater and the other parks in the northern circuit, you do need to allow more travelling time, and that obviously increases costs as well sometimes. The Great Migration is one of the main reasons for going to East Africa, and that's something we'll cover in one of the future chats. But it is fantastic game viewing, Big Five game viewing, and most people will have seen the Big Cat Diaries, so you'll be aware of the Masai Mara having large numbers of predators, which is always something that people are keen to see.
Then Southern Africa, I'm going to ask Dan to give you a little overview of why first-time safari goers, which countries we kind of recommend.
So Southern Africa, obviously, it covers a large space. You've got Kruger Park in South Africa, obviously, which is a massive draw card. It's very easy to get to. South Africa is very little culture shock in traveling here. Everyone speaks English. Transport is really good. Accommodation is great. So, Kruger Park for a first-time safari goer, value for money, the wildlife you see, it's really a top destination. Another great location, which is also very family friendly, is Namibia. Namibia is mostly wide open spaces and landscape, but is also known for Etosha National Park. Etosha is great for seeing wildlife in a desert setting. The Namibia Wildlife Resorts also has great infrastructure. Self-drive is an option, which we'll also touch on later in another episode. And then guided tours, you can do camping, lodge trips. Botswana is really sort of the jewel in Southern Africa's safari circuit because of, the major highlights, Okavango Delta, the Chobe area, Moremi. I mean, it can go on for quite a while, but that's really a top safari destination. Comes at quite a cost though, it can be quite expensive to do safaris there. Self-drive isn't really an option. There is age limits, so there's certain things you need to consider before Botswana safari. And then Zambia also is great in terms of walking safaris and other wildlife destinations and that. It's also a great location. And obviously Vic Falls as a start end point to add to it. So Southern Africa is a great choice for first-time safaris, definitely.
I think in terms of actual parks for your first-time safari goers, I'm going to say Masai Mara, Serengeti, Kruger, Etosha, Chobe, and then the Okavango Delta are probably your most recognized destinations. And in terms of easy access, good roads, great wildlife seeing, variety, great cultural interactions, these are parks we would recommend for you. We're going to now move on to all different types of safaris you can go on. Obviously, everyone is very familiar what a game drive safari is. I'm going to ask Harriet just to give you a little idea of what you can expect if wildlife is the focus and what you can expect on a game drive.
So game drives do involve very early morning starts because you want to be out looking for the animals in the early morning and again in the late afternoon. So vehicles, they can range depending on the restrictions in each country. Sometimes you've got a very open vehicle with no roof, no sides. Other times you're in a more enclosed vehicle with a pop-up roof, and you will normally be woken up early, given your cup of coffee or tea and some rusks, and then you'll set off on your game drive as the sun is rising. You'll be out for 3, maybe 4 hours, depending on the time of year, and during that game drive at most lodges, they're going to stop for a comfort break somewhere in the middle, and you'll also get another hot drink. And then in the afternoon, you normally stop for a sundowner, and the guide will choose a safe place to stop so that you can usually get out of the vehicle. When you're driving, the guide will always be giving you a safety talk before you set off in order that you know the rules and regulations, particularly in the more open vehicles. So you will need to stay sitting down, no standing up, not be talking in a loud voice. Animals, they don't see the people sitting in the vehicle. They see the shape of the vehicle, which is why it's important not to stand up or to make any sudden movements. And the guides will be having a good idea of where to look for certain animals, depending on the topography and what they've seen the previous day. And the amount of time you spend at each sighting is going to depend upon what you see and the interest of the people in the vehicle. So it is always a little bit of give and take that, someone may want to stay a bit longer at one sighting and, there's a time restriction for getting back, or the guide knows that there's something else to see further on.
Another important topic to discuss is walking safari. We often get a lot of clients that come to us and go, yes, we'd love the idea of going on safari. We're not overly enthusiastic about doing 8 hours in a game viewing vehicle. Is there an alternative to this? So we have a great option in terms of walking safaris. This is very, very popular in Zambia. In fact, it's a speciality of Zambia, the activities they offer there. So in terms of a walking safari, we often get asked, do we have to be super fit to do it? We cater for everything. So if you want to do a short walk, we have safaris where you can go and do a 2-hour walk in the morning and then do an afternoon game drive. So you get the best of both. We also offer tours and safaris where you can literally walk every day for the entire duration of the day. Often you do have a break over the hottest period of the day. And much like the rhythm of Africa, you have to fit in with what the wildlife is doing. So early morning walk, you're going to get the most interaction. You're going to come across most of the wildlife. And then as the heat of the day comes in, much like the animals find shade and rest, so you will also spend a few hours out of the African sun, catch your breath, and then late afternoon, off you go again. So walking safaris, definitely highly recommended. All types of duration are catered for. and it's a great way to break up a safari day. Another option, which I'm going to ask Dan to chat about, is what a fly-in safari is.
So flying safari is very popular in Botswana. Reason being is that getting from different locations or zones to see wildlife, it takes a long time to drive there. Sometimes roads can be in a bad condition or non-existent. So it basically cuts out travel time from one location to the next. And it also means you can get to more remote locations where other vehicles can't get to. So flying safari, you can pair with staying at various different camps, and you can hop between camps. It's also possible to fly in and drive out. That's quite popular in places like Tanzania, in the Serengeti, for example. So flying safari really is for people with limited time. They don't want to do the long drives, the bumpy, dusty drives from one location to the other. And like I said, we'll set up flights, light aircraft. Just things to consider is that there will be a luggage limit restriction. Flights can be bumpy certain times of year. So if you suffer from motion sickness or air sickness, that's something to consider. And also it'll push up the price. So it's going to be a budget thing to consider. Probably the other highlight is seeing wildlife and the landscape from, that bird's eye view. So often flights over the delta or the wetlands area, that's, quite spectacular to witness. So that's another top tip for your safari option.
Another safari style, a safari option, which is available in certain areas, is boat safaris or Mokoros. So Mokoro is very unique to Botswana, and it's in the Okavango Delta, which is the jewel of Botswana. It's a very, very unique location, and the idea behind a Mokoro is you have a traditional polo that will take you through the delta, which in the flood season is absolutely spectacular. In Botswana, on a Mokoro safari, it's not so much about spotting game. It's more about the actual experience of being in an absolute Eden, going between the lilies, watching the sunrise or watching the sunset, and the sheer beauty of the area makes Mokoro an extremely unique and sought-after activity. And anyone going to Botswana who happens to be traveling within that season, we would always recommend that you do a Mokoro. And then you've also got boat safaris, which can take various forms. If you've got rivers, there's many countries that you are able to do a boat safari from. For example, Chobe National Park offer great sunsets and sunrises where you will get to view all the animals coming down to the river. Often there's you can have a sunset cruise, you can have a dinner on the boats. There's lots and lots of options. There's also very specialist style safaris like balloon, horseback, canoeing safaris. I'm going to just ask Kara to have a little chat about balloon safaris to start with.
So I've been extremely lucky in my years of travel, and I've done balloon safaris over the Serengeti, Sossusvlei and the Masai Mara, and it is the most fantastic experience. You're up in the air, you don't hear any sounds, and you're looking down, if you're lucky, at an awful lot of wildlife, but at least at the scenery. It does involve a very early morning wake-up call, and then they inflate the balloon before the sun is rising, and then up you go in your giant basket. The game viewing can be absolutely spectacular. Normally the flights last about an hour, and then when you come down, often there's a breakfast, just as a reward for that very early morning start. But drifting over the wildlife and the scenery in any part of Africa is absolutely spectacular. Balloon safaris are restricted to certain areas because of prevailing winds, so there are not over all parks are you able to do a flight. But where you are, it is something that really is a once-in-a-lifetime special event and well worth spending a little bit of extra money on.
Horseback, another one. If you're a keen horseback and you have a degree of competence on a horse and you're keen to see Africa from a different perspective, highly recommend it. Can be a bit on the dear side, but if you have the budget for it, it's an extremely popular activity because it allows you to get up to the wildlife way closer than you would in an open vehicle game drive. The wildlife will see the horse and you, but it will not see you as separate from the horse. So it's a very sought after activity for competent horse people. And and then I'm going to ask Dan to chat about canoe safaris.
Okay, canoe safaris. I've not actually been on a canoe safari myself, but I've been canoeing on the mighty Zambezi, whitewater rafting. I've also done a canoe trip, a morning canoe trip on the Zambezi, and I've done canoeing on the Orange River. So I've done a little bit, but there are extended trips you can do. You could do overnight trips on canoe, as well as, like I mentioned, the short 2-3 hour canoeing on the Zambezi. I think for the overnight or the longer trips, that's more of a sought after niche sort of activity. Majority of people are quite happy with just doing a half day or an afternoon canoe trip. Places like Victoria Falls, going on the Zambezi, you're going to come across crocodiles, hippos. You'll see probably elephants on the banks of the river, lots of bird species. So very exhilarating, exciting experience. And then if you did canoeing trips, say on the Orange River, you would overnight, on the banks of the Orange River. That's really sort of a wildlife, an experience of just basically camping out in nature and being out in the quiet and that. So very niche activity. Other places like Mana Pools, I think they do it, which is what we also offer. But majority of people normally with us would do the half-day trip. So yeah, canoeing trip is another thing to consider that we can offer you.
Probably one of the most asked questions from our clients over the years is, are safaris good for families? Are they available for families? What can they expect? Because obviously there's always a concern when there's children involved. And yeah, the short and sweet of it is absolutely. There's certain destinations that are more child-friendly. There's a lot of things to consider in terms of traveling with children. Probably the biggest question we get asked is malaria. Being Africa, a lot of the game parks are in malaria areas, but there's certain areas that are malaria safe. And we often recommend first-time safari goers who are coming out with their children to perhaps consider a safari to the Addo Elephant National Park in the Eastern Cape in South Africa as an example. It's malaria-free, fantastic wildlife experiences. Every budget is catered for, from your high-end safari lodges to your budget options. Obviously there's a few tips that we do recommend for people traveling with children. Up in East Africa, for example, we would always recommend that if you are traveling with with children, especially small children, you consider a private tour. In other words, your own vehicle and a guide, and then we would tailor-make a tour that would be suitable for children. The accommodation facilities we would use would have certain activities tailor-made for children, like ranger courses, etc. Often children like swimming pools. We would obviously make use of lodges with swimming pools. And we'd keep the drive time to a minimum. It's very hard for a really young child to sit in an open vehicle for 8 hours. So we tend to reduce the amount of time that they would spend on a vehicle. What we recommend is contact us, give us a brief on how old your children are they easily distracted, etc., etc. It's best if we tailor-make a program for people with children. But yes, the short and the sweet of it is absolutely. All families are welcome. There are certain restrictions on group tours in terms of ages. Not all group tours take children. So, obviously if you guys are looking to join a group, you need to take that into consideration. But yeah, tailor-made, probably the way to go. So often we get asked the question, what exactly happens on a game drive? What can you expect? What are the rules and the regulations? What activities, what sightings are you most likely to see? What happens if you need the toilet? I'm going to ask Harriet, who has been on many, many game drives in her life, just to give you a general overview of what you can expect when you go on a game drive.
So when you're going on a game drive, it's going to be a large vehicle, sometimes open-sided. And so at some safari lodges, there will actually be a special ramp in order that you can climb up onto the vehicle, because the seats will be staggered so that everyone gets a good view. Different lodges have different policies on the number of people in each vehicle. Sometimes, depending where you are, there'll be a tracker sitting at the front of the vehicle, and he'll be looking for the spoor from the animals on the road when you go out on your morning game drive, and be able to tell you a story of what's happened overnight. You'll be given a safety briefing prior to departure about how to behave and not behave on the vehicle in order to keep everybody safe. The guide in some places will have a gun with him, in other places only a camera. It's a good idea to pack your binoculars because you will be able to see everything much better through binoculars, and if the guide has a pair and is sharing, then you might have to wait and the animals might have moved on. A game drive typically is going to last 3 to 4 hours. There will be a comfort break during the game drive, and if you're in somewhere like the Kruger, that will probably be at a rest camp where there are toilet facilities. Otherwise, the guide will give you instructions on where it's safe to go. Always bury your toilet paper, but best to go to the loo before you leave on your game drive and wait until you return if at all possible.
I'm going to ask Dan to kind of give you an idea in terms of vehicles. So generally speaking, between East and Southern Africa, there is a difference in terms of vehicles used. And I'm just going to ask Dan to give you a little overview on what a East African game park vehicle is compared to a Southern African game park.
Yeah, so I think Harriet's already touched on a little bit of that, but to elaborate, so specifically in East Africa, which is Kenya and Tanzania, you would have the sort of the stretch 4x4 Land Cruisers with a pop-up roof. They have large sliding windows. Usually they seat 6 people, 3 rows on either side. Every person has a window seat, and then obviously when you're inside the actual game parks on the game drive, the driver would pop up the roof, and that's when you can stand up inside the vehicle, view the game through the pop-up roof area above it, roof height. So it makes great for viewing the wildlife, stretching the legs. They're fairly comfortable, those vehicles. They got great suspension. There's often a water container inside for drinking water. There's a fridge to keep drinks cool. And then, when you're leaving the game parks and you're driving back to your lodge, for example, they close the roof and you drive off to your next destination. In Southern Africa, generally game drives will be in open-sided vehicles. They will normally seat about between 6 to 9 people, passengers, 3 in either row. And that's great for seeing wildlife real up close because there's no obstructions in terms of windows and that sort of thing in the way. Also very comfortable vehicles that they use for those game drives. So visibility is also great. One thing also to consider is air conditioning isn't really a thing in game drive vehicles, purely because of the conditions that the vehicles are put through. So it's very hot, it's very dusty, the vehicles are put through their paces. So generally the air conditioning won't work if it does have some. It's open windows, it's bush aircon.
Another thing I think to elaborate on is because game drives happen early morning, everyone starts early morning, and we talk early is early, that as that sun's coming up, you're on that vehicle. And because they're open-sided, you need to know that things can get pretty cold in the morning. So you need to dress appropriately. Your guide will obviously discuss that with you. And a lot of the time, the lodge or the safari company will provide a blanket. But generally, we recommend that when you are coming out to Africa to do a safari, you bring proper cold winter stuff for those early mornings. As that sun comes up, you need to be able to shed that because it does get pretty hot come 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. Another thing we often get asked is, what are the road conditions like? What can you expect in terms of going into various game parks? What happens if you want to go closer to the wildlife? You don't want to stick with the main roads. What can we expect in terms of conditions? So I'm going to ask Harriet to give you a little overview of, generally speaking, what an African road is like in a game park.
So the conditions are going to vary hugely between different parks and also at the time of year. So if you choose to visit the Serengeti in April, you could be driving extremely slowly through an awful lot of mud. If you visit Etosha in midsummer, then yes, you're going to be dealing with a lot of dust. So make sure you're aware when you book and decide what time of year you're going to travel, what the likely conditions are. That will also affect what clothes you're going to bring with you. in some countries, the roads are going to be extremely bumpy, and if it's after the rainy season and the roads haven't been graded, because please don't expect too much tarmac, then the drive is going to be slower and bumpier. If you suffer from motion sickness, it's a very good idea to have some motion sickness pills with you and take those in the morning before you depart. In other countries like South Africa, if you're going between Johannesburg and the Kruger, then yes, you're going to be on a tarmac road all the way. Once you're on your game drive, again, the regulations in each park are extremely different as to whether your guide is allowed to drive off-road or not. This is for the protection of the environment and the animals. So if you're in the Kruger, your guide won't be allowed to drive off the tarmac road, and so that means at some wildlife sightings there can be quite a traffic jam. Whereas if you're in Sabi Sands, for example, then within reason and for special sightings, the guide will be allowed to go off-road, and the number of vehicles at each sighting is extremely strictly regulated.
Okay, and I think that's a wrap for our first installment of the African Budget Safaris Boma Campfire discussion. Give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe to us, tell your friends about it, and hopefully this was a good overview for first-time safari goers. And we'd obviously like you to leave us comments below. We will do our best to then cover those comments during the course of these discussions we're going to be having. But hopefully this will give you an idea of what you can expect when coming on safari. Feel free to subscribe to our newsletter off the link on our website, africanbudgetsafaris.com, or we have a free 6-part email course that you can also subscribe to on our website, and we will give the link below for that.